exhibition, Unlocking Life's Code, is a Smithsonian Institution Traveling Exhibition Services exhibit. And as the Central Florida History Museum, we often bring in exhibits of national importance from the Smithsonian or from other institutions who create them, but we always augment them with our local history. So this exhibition really piqued our interest because it's more of a science and STEM related exhibit, and we really looked at it as a bit of a challenge on how we could take something that's a national topic and is about science and make it about history. And so we took on that challenge, and that is what we've done. And so the exhibit itself, Genome, has several different content areas, but it looks at the human genome and other genomes in the world, in the natural world, for like birds and things like that. But it covers areas about nature, it covers areas about genetics, it talks about your human genome and health. Genome, if you don't know, is everything that makes you up who you are. Genetics are the individual pieces of that, so whether your earlobes are attached or detached, that's one genetic that goes into making your larger genome. This exhibition looks at a lot of interesting little facts. It's a very high-tech exhibition, has a lot of great multimedia presentation and interactives and things like that. For the local section of this exhibition, we asked ourselves the question, what is the genome of Central Florida? And so we started looking at the different themes that are presented in the Smithsonian exhibition and looking at ways that we could relate them back to Central Florida. We developed 3 different sections in the local area. The first one is about Wendover Bog. Wendover Bog is about a 7,000-year-old bog burial site right here in Central Florida. Most people don't think of Central Florida history as being old, but this burial site is older than the Egyptian pyramids. That was excavated in the 1980s, initially by accident. They were doing some construction and found some of the human remains. And so we talk a little bit about the genetics behind that, and the really fascinating thing about Wendover Bog is that they actually found brains still inside 91 of those burials, which is really uncommon because this is 7,000-year-old brains. And they had shrunk to about 25% of the size that they were, but they were able to use genetic material, the DNA from the bones, to be able to sequence that DNA and find out that Wendover Bog, the people there were part of the X haplogroup. And so that really tied us into our sections about DNA testing for locals and also genetic genealogy and things like that. So we talk a little bit about the repercussions of some of that science as well in the Wendover area, but it's really a fascinating site, and we're actually exhibiting some of the burial goods. We don't show human remains for ethical reasons, but this is the first time these items have ever been exhibited. The second section, we took a little bit of a creative spin, and we actually looked at the genome of citrus. And what we found was that there was a lot of different testing done here in the 1800s and 1900s, trying to find different types of citrus, different breeds, but also finding ones that were able to stand up to the cold and stand up to different diseases. So we talk a little bit about some of the interesting varieties that were created locally, and some of which are still the citrus we're eating today. And then the third section, coming up to today, again, what is the genome of Central Florida? And so we looked at a diverse group of individuals, and we made a list of maybe 40 to 50 people, all different backgrounds, all different diversities, really looked at a lot of different characteristics of individuals and what we knew about them already. And we selected 5 people from about those 40 or more. We chose Mayor Buddy Dyer. And the reason we chose Mayor Dyer, he's obviously of white European descent, but we had heard that he was a longtime Central Floridian, so that his family had been here for several generations, which many people know is a bit of a novelty. We're sort of a transient community. And so we thought it was really interesting to see what we could actually dig up in terms of his Central Florida family roots. The second candidate, Brendan O'Connor, is just a really great guy who's really interested in history. He comes in here and he does a lot of research. He's an editor for Bungalower, and because he's always in here doing local research and he's really interested in that sense of place and the small histories, we asked him if he'd ever done his own. He's straight out of Canada, and so he thinks he's Canadian. I said, with a name like O'Connor, I don't think you're Canadian. And so we chose him. And then Senator Geraldine Thompson, I didn't know much about her except for that she too has a vested interest in history. She is African American, and I knew she was born in the South, but that's about all I knew. She was largely responsible for founding the Wellsville African American Heritage and Culture Museum. So thought she would be somebody who might be interested in this type of a project. George Estevez, or Jorge Estevez, all I knew about him was that he is of Cuban descent, and I thought that could add an interesting spin to our mix, which I later found out made the project very difficult because it is impossible to do Cuban genealogy from the mainland here. And our last person we chose, but not least, was Tony Dion Presley, who plays for the Orlando Pride. We sort of looked at our mix. We had politicians, we had some media people, and we wanted something different. So we went to sports, but so many of our sports stars are not from here. And so we specifically chose Tony because she was born locally in Central Florida. So that's how we kind of came to choosing those 5 specific individuals. The best way to get started on researching your own family history is to just print off a blank family tree off of the internet and start filling it out. Talk to your parents, talk to your aunts, your uncles, anybody who's living in your family who might have some facts for you, and then just start doing some research. 10, 15, 20 years ago, people actually had to go to the cemeteries. They actually had to go to Germany to find the records. So it's pretty incredible what you can do, but the first step is to really just find out what you can from your family to get started. I hope that people can see how science and history really have a lot to do with one another, and we hope, especially for the local section and the genealogy parts of the genome exhibit, that people do get an interest in their own personal histories and seeing how their own individual stories weave into the fabric of Central Florida's narrative, of the nation's narrative, and really, when it comes to our ancestors, who've immigrated here from other places at some point in time, just getting interested in where they come from and how that fits into history and the different stories.